Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we are playing some Necro Stompy. Not quite the busted combo that people are jamming Necrodominance in, but I think it's going to be a really strong value card for the sort of deck that we're playing. So we are pretty much just playing a mono-black good stuff deck, but there is a lot of interesting deck building considerations when you play something like Necrodominance. So this means that if we've got cards going into our graveyard, after this is in play, they get exiled. So this kind of makes doing scam things not ideal for what we're trying to accomplish. So for that reason, we're not actually running like the Grief and Trolls and things, because otherwise we can Necrodominance, get a bunch of cards, and not really do the things we need to do with them. Also, we're not using Necrodominance as a thing we chuck into play on turn 1. So we're not running the mana acceleration for this. We're just running like a bunch of good stuff. And then this is what we're going to play after we've, emptied our hand a little bit, then we can draw back up. But Necrodominance wants us to have some more life to work with, because the only cards we get are ones that we pay life for. So in order to do that, we've got Sheoldred the Apocalypse, which is obviously very good with Necrodominance. We pay 10 life, we draw 10 cards, gain 20 life. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. Then we have the Exsanguinator Cavalry. It's a 3-mana 2/3 with Menace and lifelink. Whenever a knight you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and create a blood token. So this will gain us life so we can draw more cards. It'll also give us blood tokens, which we can then use to cycle through our deck. If we're under Necro and we need to draw some cards and we don't necessarily have the life, we can still cycle through with the blood tokens until we find something that does gain us more life or whatever. So that's quite useful. And also, just having a threat that gives us a little bit of selection is quite nice too, because we won't always have a Necro in play. Then we have Barrowgoyf. So this is a 3-mana Death Touch lifelink creature, which has got the same power and toughness as Tarmogoyf, so it checks both graveyards. So even though we'll be exiling our graveyard after the Necro's in play, this will still feed off our opponent's graveyard and maybe one or two of the cards that are in our graveyard before we play the Necro in the first place. But because we're running Barrowgoyf, which is one of the best lifelink threats I think that we can play, it does mean that our graveyard hate has to be a little bit different. We can't be running Doughty Voidwalker if we're trying to do Barrowgoyf things, because if we're exiling our own graveyard and we're also exiling our opponents with Doughty Voidwalker, then Barrowgoyf becomes a little bit less of a tempting option. So I want to keep the Barrowgoyf in, so we're not running Doughty Voidwalker, we're instead running another new card, Emperor of Bones. This is a 2-mana 2/2, beginning of combat on your turn, exile up to one target card from a graveyard. And we can pay 2 to adapt it, and then whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on it, so when we adapt it, we can put a creature card exile with Emperor of Bones onto the battlefield under our control. It gains haste and we sacrifice it at the end step, and then it gets exiled again. So we can use this to keep our opponent's graveyard under wraps. It's obviously not as good at doing that as something like a Doughty Voidwalker, but it is still incidental hate for our opponent's graveyard, and it means we can play the Barrowgoyf a little bit more easily. Now this might come back to bite us, but we're trying new cards, and that's what we're here for. And then we're rounding this out with a lot of stuff that is pretty much expected. So we've got Thoughtseizes, because we need some hand disruption if we're in black. We're not playing Grief for the reasons mentioned before. So we've got Thoughtseizes and a couple of Hymns to soften up our opponent's hand. And then we've got 3 Fatal Pushes and 3 Sheoldred's Edicts. So we've got 6 nice removal spells there that are able to hit different targets. I like Fatal Push quite a lot because it hits Psychic Frog. And then we have 4 Vexing Bauble. This is to stop our opponent being able to counter our spells. It's also a really good tool to fight against combo decks. So it kind of does it all. It slices, it dices, it wrecks our opponents. And if it's not good, we get to draw a card with it. So what's not to like there? Then we have the Orcish Bowmasters. I don't really need to say anything about this one, I don't think. In our mana base, we have got a whole bunch of swamps. Basic lands are good. We've got a Shadowy Backstreet and an Undercity Sewers with some fetch lands to go and find them. So this is sometimes we'll just need that selection, and it's worth running the fetch lands for this selection that we can reach for. Then we have 4 Wastelands, because I love Wasteland and it's a good way to interact with a whole bunch of decks. And if we're drawing extra cards, maybe we're finding extra Wastelands, and then we can kind of go there. Now there is a tiny bit of tension with these Wastelands and this Necrodominance, but you have to remember that these Wastelands are being counted as spells. We're an 18 land deck with 4 Wastelands that are spells that will sometimes help us cast like an Emperor or a Barrowgoyf or whatever, but I'm counting these as spells and then all of our lands tap for black. So that's the logic there for Necrodominance. Maybe we're not supposed to be running 4, but we're playing lots of new cards today, so we're going to see how it feels. 16 cards of the new set slapped right in there. Sideboard-wise, we just got some tools to sort of shore up a few things here and there. So we've got a little bit more removal, so we've got another Fatal Push, another Sheoldred's Edict, and I wanted another piece of targeted removal that can hit bigger things, so Go for the Throat is the one I selected because this hits Murktide Regent. It doesn't hit big construct tokens. But that's why we have 2 Powder Kegs when we are against those sorts of decks. This will smash artifact lands, as well as all the constructs our opponents made, and any like moxes or anything that are hanging around. So this is quite a nice one. Then we've got some more Graveyard Hate. Like I said, we need Graveyard Hate that's kind of surgical in how we're getting. Obviously, we're not running surgical ourselves because of Vexing Bauble, but the Faerie Macabre can be turn 0 Graveyard Hate, which is something we need. And hopefully between this and the Emperor of Bones, we should have enough. A little bit more hand disruption for when that's better than the removal spells in our deck. And then we have 4 opposition agents. Sometimes we'll just need more threats in a matchup. And sometimes this will be an absolutely backbreaking card against things like Doomsday, or decks with Knight of the Reliquary, Elvish Reclaimer, that sort of jazz. So yeah, I think I've explained the choices behind building this one. It was quite an interesting exercise, and I don't necessarily think this is optimal, but we want to try the new cards, see how they fit. I think there probably is a good Necro Stompy shell somewhere, and this is the first steps towards finding what that looks like. So please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. And if you've got anything you want me to play on my channel, by all means get in touch. I do donation decks. That's a really good way to support the channel, and I do appreciate seeing what you lovely people come up with. Alright, let's get Necro Stomping. Our opener here is a little bit land heavy. We've got some hand disruption, we've got some removal, and we've got a threat that we can work towards. And I don't hate having a Surveil land. I think I will keep this because we have 2 forms of interaction on it. But we're also on the draw, so we're more likely to find some threats as time goes on. But let's say we get... Okay, I was going to say, let's say we get griefed and stuff. That would be a bad time for us because they could reanimate our Sheoldred. Alright, a Tamiyo Inquisitive Student. Alright, so we found ourselves a nice threat. I'm going to Thoughtseize our opponent and soften up their hand a little bit. We're relying on this Tamiyo to do some work. Alright, the days on our Thoughtseize. Fair enough, opponent. The next turn we can either Sheoldred's Edict or get a Surveil going. I think we're probably better off Sheoldred's Edicting this. I do like the Emperor of Bones though. Do I like that more than the Tamiyo? So the Sheoldred's Edict can deal with the Tamiyo once it's flipped anyway, so I'm not actually that bothered by the Tamiyo right now. I think I'm just going to get a threat down. This can also pressure a Tamiyo potentially. So we go to our combat here, and then the Emperor of Bones can eat their days. Alright, it doesn't get to eat their days. So we could Sheoldred's Edict and play Shadowy Backstreet if we wanted to, or we could just play the Cavalry. Opponent's got a Wasteland. I don't really want to play the Backstreet anymore. That kind of incentivizes me to play this Cavalry. Although if we play this Backstreet, it might make our opponent Wasteland here rather than cracking a clue. Get this going. Barrowgoyf. Barrowgoyf is large. I will keep this large creature. So this way, if they do Wasteland us, we've got some pretty sweet follow-ups. Are they cracking a clue here? They are cracking a clue. Let's take this Tamiyo out now. So our opponent can get towards a Murktide pretty soon. A ball. The Barrowgoyf's pretty good at tackling combat though. It's going to be pretty big. A predict. Alright, so they're going to mill our card over here, right? Oh no, they target themselves actually. That's fine. And a Channeler. Am I just jamming this Sheoldred into a potential daze? I think so. I think it's just so strong if it sticks. And it's not like we don't have more Sheoldreds to follow up with. Right, they've got the daze. So they Wasteland us, we have the Goyf. If they don't, we have the Sheoldred again. They left the card on top though. So it's going to be a Murktide. They are going for the Wasteland here, so we're on Barrowgoyf time. But 5/6 Death Sentence lifelink is quite the fearsome creature. It was worth getting this, having an attempt at the Sheoldred before our opponent can Wasteland us. Alright, they're drawing a card with a clue. Do we get the Barrowgoyf? Not an easy thing to kill in a blue-red deck. And if one of them's good, 2 of them's got to be better, right? This can attack quite happily into Murktide Regents as well. Right, they've got Unholy Heat here. We've got another Barrowgoyf. And then a Ponder as well. Even more selection. Another Wasteland. Understood. So we can play our own Wasteland here. We can play... I think I just won the Barrowgoyf. We'll play this around a daze. And then we can Wasteland them off of a Volk. And that will stop our opponent from being able to play a Murktide potentially. This is clearly our opponent trying to daze us here. Or they're trying to next level us here. Yeah, okay. Because if they have a daze there and we just Wasteland them, they then bounce it, and then our Wasteland doesn't do anything, and our opponent gets to counter our spell, and it just goes horribly wrong for us. A Lightning Bolt. Targeting the Barrowgoyf. Are we going to get a second Lightning Bolt here? I would have to imagine that's the case. There it is. Okay, well that's 6 points of damage didn't go to our face. Now we just got more life gain going on, so we can either play this Cavalry, or we can play this Sheoldred, depending on what we draw. But we're pretty sure that our opponent's got a Daze over there, by how they played a previous turn. I'd rather this catch a Daze than the Barrowgoyf. Yep, there's a Daze we knew was there, but we have to play into it so you can play the Barrowgoyf next turn. Opponent's had a lot of good business over there. I think we need the lifelink, so here comes the Barrowgoyf. Is there a 4th Daze? There's a Brainstorm looking for something. I haven't seen a Force yet, so that's certainly a possibility. If we can just crash in with the Barrowgoyf one time, I'll feel quite happy. Let's pop our opponent's graveyard out as well. We've got an Emperor of Bones, and they've got 5 types: instant, sorcery, creature, land, artifact. So it'll take us 2 turns to work through what they've got here, because we can take a sorcery and the artifact. Right, they found a Force. Right, our opponents had some pretty good draws, but that's what the Delver decks do, because they're very efficient and they can cantrip to find the things they need. So it's just been a case of our opponent always having that one thing that gets us every time. We are dead to a lightning bolt as well on the next turn. Necrodominance, not the time for you, I'm afraid. Let's get Emperor of Bones going. Alright, so we're going to exile our own Barrowgoyf here. So when we adapt it, we can then swing in with a Barrowgoyf. So we just need to survive this one turn with our Emperor of Bones intact. Petty theft. Okay. Our opponent has really had it all this game. We needed them to brick and draw some land or something for one turn. That's all we needed, but it's unfortunate for us, but that's the nature of things. Dragonsrage Channeler is a very strong Magic the Gathering card. It does let you find everything you need. Yep, and they had the 3rd lightning bolt, the 4th lightning bolt as well. Yeah, sure. We just got absolutely started on by our opponent having everything there. I imagine this matchup is probably pretty reasonable for us. I normally like playing these sorts of stompy decks into Delver style strategies. So these are the things I'm interested in. The Vexing Bauble is okay at stopping a decent chunk of our opponent's stuff, like Daze and Force of Will. And that allows us to just resolve some bigger things. But what do I not want here? I don't think we want the Thoughtseizes. We don't really want to pay the life for it. I think we'll trim 1 Vexing Ball. We just want to keep like a nice density of threats in. I like the 2-for-1s off the him. I'd rather have that than a Thoughtseize. It does reduce our turn 1 plays slightly. I think that's reasonable. Yes, our spells are not going to get counterspelled unless they counter our Vexing Ball. But then we just paid 1 mana for a Hymns Tourach there, which I can live with. Oakley dokley. No turn 1 play from our opponents. We can just hold up this Sheoldred's Edict because they play any creatures, and we know that our Edict will resolve. And then we can just start playing some creatures that will resolve and having a pretty glorious time about it. So the Edict will always hit the first thing. Okay, we're just not casting any spells on turn 2. That's okay with me. So now we just start dropping Cavalries. I don't think I want the Wasteland here. We've got Cavalry into Sheoldred. And the Sheoldred being uncounterable is going to be a bit of a problem for our opponent unless they can get their like petty thefts going, or they can get their unholy heats ticking. Alright, so now they're holding open Daze mana. So I will play around that Daze. They are showing as a hard cast spell. I imagine they probably have a Thundering Falls in their deck. There it is. I don't think Wastelanding here helps. It allows us to play around hard cast Dazes. Like a non-force of willable Sheoldred is a pretty powerful thing to be doing. Do like a Barrowgoyf as well. Let's get our lifelink going. Get a blood token, grow our creature outside of lightning bolt range. I'm just going to get more swamps. Our opponent has double Daze potentially here. So that makes me want to play this Barrowgoyf. We've just got some pretty large and in charge beat sticks here. Right, they would like a Brainstorm. Obviously, if we had the Sheoldred in play, they probably wouldn't be going for the Brainstorm there. But I think playing around double Daze, which is a thing our opponent could have had, makes sense. This Vexing Bauble just entirely warped this game. Our opponent probably kept their hand on the basis of being able to interact for free, but we said no to that. They play something like a Murktide. They're predicting. There's a Wasteland. Unlicensed Hearse. Sure, that's fine. So the thing about Barrowgoyf is it also is a card advantage engine, which you're about to witness. Which is pretty great. I'm going to attacks here. Attack both of these. And then as soon as the Barrowgoyf connects... Okay. Like, it still triggers off your graveyard as well. So we mill 3 cards, which helps grow our thing. We didn't find any creatures. So this draws you a creature from among the mill cards. I will play this out. I will play Sheoldred the Apocalypse. Do I want to take out 2 of our opponent's red sources? Alright, our opponent's had enough. Alright, Vexing Bauble looks pretty darn good there. Do I want another one? Maybe over a Necro? Try that. It just completely changes the way the game works. Our opponent might sideboard to make our Vexing Baubles worse, but if that's the case, then we just cycle them. And if we're cycling them with a Sheoldred out, that's a positive gain of life as well. It's also Delirium to pump up the size of our Barrowgoyf. In terms of having an artifact type. Yeah. I think this is alright. Like, Orcish Bowmasters, obviously very good against Delver strategies. They play X1s, and then they try and get you with them. So our opponent didn't play... Oh, I would like this Vexing Bauble in play. I think I would prefer that over the Surveyor. I was thinking because our opponent didn't play anything on turn 1, it would possibly be worth playing the Sewers out there, but this just gives us potentially uncountable Bowmasters to actually snipe down one of their X1s, which is pretty incredible. So we've got a little bit of graveyard hate. We've got 2 nice lifelink threats. We've got the Bowmasters. Alright, you can brainstorm away. And no threat. This does look like a lightning bolt in our future, though. So we just play out a guy and they lightning bolt it. I'd rather not operate on that axis. I'm just going to play out this Verdant Catacombs. And just in case I have a Stifle, we can fetch it at a different timing. Predict. Okay, I am certainly going to take this free Bowmaster's goodness. Does our opponent still want to draw 2 cards? They do still want to draw lots of cards. Right, so we've got quite a lot of power in play now. We're taxing our opponent's cantrips. A Tamiyo. It's fine by me. I don't really like Tamiyo in these sort of Delver shells that much. I think it shines... Ooh, Uncountable Hymn is kind of... I was going to say, it kind of shines better in the more control-y style decks. Send them both. Would I like a big Barrowgoyf? Or I could play an Emperor of Bones. I think I want the Barrowgoyf here. Just keep the big hits coming. Like, this Tamiyo doesn't do an awful lot whilst we've got the Bowmasters in play. Because cracking those clues gives us extra pings, which is not something I think our opponent wants us to have access to. Like, they obviously still have the choice. They can trade the pings and the growing of our Orc army for cards. Alright, so they have a lightning bolt here. We now have a 4/5 Barrowgoyf. They can make a Murktide, clean out their graveyard, and make our Barrowgoyf smaller, but it will still have Death Touch. Or Brainstorm, sure. So this is going to flip the Tamiyo. This only triggers off hitting damage to a player, which is interesting to know. Sure, you can shrink our little creatures. What is the next step for our opponent here? It's really nice to just be able to know that the terms that the game's being played on with the Vexing Bauble. Right, so they've got another Tamiyo. Be a pretty good time to draw a Sheoldred's Edict. We did not draw a Sheoldred's Edict. Do I want a Swamp? I don't think so. If we Wasteland this and they lightning bolts, like, we are sending both creatures at the Tamiyo anyway, I think. So would I like a Cavalry? I think I would like a Cavalry. Just Menace, it's lifelink, it does it all. I think if they'd have had a bolt, they might have fight off on the Bowmaster. Alright, they've got an Unholy Heat here. So we're going to lose our Barrowgoyf. Sure, you can plus this Tamiyo. Our opponent's got a lot of lands they didn't have in the first game here, so this is giving us a chance. They're going to put the Unholy Heat back on top. Feels like a thing they might want to do. So we can play the Emperor of Bones and exile our Orcish Bowmasters and put that in instant speed whenever we want. Unholy Heat on the Cavalry. Sheoldred's Edict. That is an interesting one, isn't it? Let's cast a Hymn first. You got 2 cards in hand. I've got a Hymn to Tourach. A hard cast, Force of Negation. Okay. Each opponent sacrifices a Planeswalker, please. Attack, and then we can just start gassing up with the old Necrodominance. Plenty of life to work with. Yep, you crack that clue, opponent. Blue and a red. Meltdown. Okay. Like, the Vexing Bauble has already done quite a lot of work for us here. Alright, we're in with the Necro. So our maximum hand size is 5. So we're just going to draw 3 cards. Yeah, so we're basically just going to have Ancestral Recall every turn. Yeah, so normally these mono-black scam decks feel really good into Delver decks. Sorry, not mono-black. These mono-black sort of good stuff decks like this. And I think we kind of demonstrated why it's the case. Game 1, our opponent literally had to draw the exact answer to everything we played on the turn we played it in order to win that game. Like if we just had one hit with a Barrowgoyf, that buys us like 2 more turns of draws, and our opponent was kind of running on fumes. And if they bricked one more time after that, I think we were solid. But yeah, you can see the matchup looked pretty good. I'm happy with this deck so far. Let's go to round 2. I quite like our opener here. I'll keep this one. We're on the draw as well, so we're probably going to find a land in our first 3 turns of draws. Statistically likely. So we can go Bauble into Uncounterable Emperor of Bones, into Barrowgoyf or Exsanguinator Cavalry, depending on what is best at the time. And then we draw a land. If we don't draw a land, then we're going to be drawing some other spells. And as long as they're not 3 drops or Sheoldred, we're going to be able to cast them. Alright, opponent, what have you got for me? A Mishra's Bauble. Target themselves. Okay, so they're working out whether they want to play a fetch land or not this turn. They do want to play a fetch land. Mishra's Bauble. Yet another thing that gets caught underneath the Vexing Bauble. How do you feel about this one, opponent? Alright, we got a 2 for 1. That softens up our opponent's hand. If we can find a land and then smash a nice hymn to Tourach at them, it's going to feel pretty good. So our opponent could be on Delver. Like, all the signs are there right now. All island fetch lands. Yep, there's a Volcanic Island there. And Delver is a very good deck. So it's not surprised to see it. Ooh, we might go on the Grixis build with frogs. There's the frog. Alright, we don't actually have the removal spell right now for the frog. Which is awkward. Because this frog will just win the game on its own. Because it's just absolute bananas as a magic card. Alright, come on deck. A swamp. If we him, our opponent's just going to funnel everything into this frog and we're going to die quicker. But our opponent's going to have less resources. And it means that if we draw a removal spell, it's likely to hit this. Alright, I'm down to clown with this. Let's get you with a him. Just put all the counters on the frog, then we just need to draw one of our 6 removal spells to take this out. Yep. Here they go. Yep. And a lightning bolt. And a wasteland. Psychic Frog is, in my opinion, too strong of a Magic the Gathering card. It's kind of just does it all, really. Yikes. Alright, so we're going to take 4 now. Our opponent's going to draw a card, and look at that. They've gassed all the way back up to 2 cards. And maybe they get to counterspell our removal spell. You can tell Psychic Frog is really good because everyone's running it instead of Bowmasters. Oh, they drew a Murktide as well. Alright. I think we are quite far behind now. The chances our opponent has a Daze in hand are technically low, but I feel they've got one. Just feel it in my bones. Oh, wow. They didn't. Okay. So they're going to bash us for 11 if they want here. And that makes both of their threats lethal next turn. Or either of their threats, I should say. That's the correct grammar, I suppose. Yep. Frog get bigger. I think this 2 mana 5/6 flying Ophidian might be a bit too good. Might be a little bit too good. So now if we do find a removal spell, it might not be good enough. Depends if we can actually gain any life off this Barrowgoyf. Delver of Secrets, sure. Thoughtseize isn't the one. Can this mill us over anything that helps here? No. A Bowmaster pings this down, but then we're dead in the air. Yeah, our opponent's just got us here. Yeah. We just lost to a turn 2 frog and there's nothing we could do about it. Yikes. Alright. It's pretty much the same deal as before. We want these sorts of things in and we'll take out the Thoughtseizes and we'll trim 1 Necro. And again, I think this matchup's fine, but if a frog comes down early and we can't answer it, it will just win the game because that's what that card does. I suspect it will not be legal in Legacy by Christmas. That is my prediction. Yeah, this is fine. We actually have a removal spell for the frog this time. Perhaps Bauble. So, arguably we could have played the Catacombs to get a swamp first to play around potential stifles, but I don't believe our opponent is running any stifles, and I would rather have access to a Surveil land later on if it becomes a thing we want. I haven't seen these builds with a stifling lately. But it's certainly possible they're running like one of them or something. Alright. Playing a Bauble into our Bauble. Okay. Our opponent is trying to build up a graveyard for the purposes of Murktide Regent. That's what that tells me. So, are we playing the Emperor of Bones or are we just going to like smash our opponent's hand. I think we're just going to smash our opponent's hand here. You wanted cards in your graveyard, opponent. Well, there's some cards in your graveyard. Okay, the lightning bolt that would have killed our Emperor of Bones. Pretty glad we snagged that. If they tap out for a Murktide, we just go for the throw tit and we get to move on with our lives. A Ponder, sure. And we've got plenty of like lifelinky threats in our deck, so we should in theory be able to ignore the Delver damage. We played 2 spells this game, and both of them have been 2-for-1s. Sheoldred's Edict. I think I might rather have an Emperor of Bones here. I quite like this card. It does a lot more work than you would initially think. We're going to take out just the Ponder here. Makes Delirium harder for our opponent. And it's one of the things that can fuel a Murktide. A Channeler, sure. They're holding up 1 blue mana. I don't think that's really going to be doing anything here. It's important to note. A Barrowgoyf we can't cast. Alright, each opponent can sacrifice a non-token creature here. It's always going to get the weakest thing anyway. Could get hit by a surprise Spell Pierce. There's a possibility. Okay. They're just dazing here into our Vexing Bauble. I guess they wanted the Surveil more than they wanted the land in play. And that daze is obviously not doing anything for them. So this can remove a Channeler, I suppose. We don't care about the Murktide because we're going to be able to beat it anyway with our removal spell. We just take the thing that gives them Delirium. And this is also a creature that we can reach for at some point. Would like to be able to put a lifelink threat in place. We can ignore this Delver because we're holding up this Go for the Throat for a Murktide. But there's a possibility that eventually we have to fire it at this Insectile Aberration. And that will be a bit awkward. We've got Fetch Land to really make that Brainstorm pop. No. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't have one. It might mean they want to draw the cards and still cast a spell. Alright, a Ponder is just going to shuffle. We already have 3 types in our graveyard for the purposes of Delirium off the Channeler. We might be able to throw that in randomly and block the Insect Aberration with it. A land here would be great. Not a land. Right, I will take out this Ponder. We'll save the Bowmasters. If our opponent casts a cantrip, we can fire off the Bowmasters and take out the Delver. Yeah, we'll take 3 again. Not a fan of this, but it is what it is. We are holding up potential hardcast Force of Negation here. It's important to note. A Dragon's Rage Channeler. In the end step, we now have a target for this Bowmaster that's worth doing. Let's smash this in and see what happens. Let's ping down the Channeler. Have we got a response? No. We've got 1 card in hand. A Fatal Push. That's the exact sort of card that I've been looking for here. Let's just kill this and be done with it. Go attacks. We can take out Lightning Bolt. It's fine. We've got instants in our graveyard now. Now, because we 2-for-1 our opponent so much, we're like miles ahead in cards. We just need to make sure we can actually deploy these cards. The fact that we have a Go for the Throat we can cast is quite nice. We can obviously bring back the Channeler if we need it at some point here. Another Vexing Bauble. Right, let's take out this Brainstorm. Yeah, so in our opponent's end step, we can bring back that Channeler if that's the thing we want to do. And that'll give us lethal, right? 3 plus 4. Alright, yep. That's more like how I envision this matchup going. Let's just resubmit. We know what we're doing, and it looks pretty good. We've got removal here. And we've got a nice 2-for-1. I'm going to believe in this one. Nothing from our opponent there. Alright, if our opponent didn't do anything on 1, I'm happy for them to wasteland this. Assuming they're not going to do anything again. Yes, Graveyard Hate is nice. This is the sort of Graveyard Hate we want against Delver. Just like slowly stripping away little bits. Which is nice. There is a Mishra's Bauble. Alright, they're fetching away the top card of their library. But we've got Fatal Push around Daze, which is the thing we want to use on the early creatures anyway, because Sheoldred's Edict can hit the larger ones. That's a pretty good setup for next turn. The turn after, we can do Hymn to Tourach around Daze if we wish. And just absolutely start crunching through our opponent's permanents and hands. And yeah, just doing the good old-fashioned mono-black stuff. A Counterbalance. That's somewhat unexpected. Do I want to play into a Daze? No, I think we can just do this a bit slower. Now, we are susceptible potentially to this Counterbalance, and there's some cantrips going over and fixing their deck. But our big haymakers are 3-drops, and our opponent's deck only has Brazen Borrower and Force of Negation is 3-drops. So they shouldn't have many in their deck. So we should be able to play our big scary things. And they're not going to have any 4-drops, so our Sheoldred won't be countered by the Counterbalance this game. Unless there's something I've forgotten about. Psychic Frog. Not my friend. In the end step, we will attempt to kill this with a Fatal Push. If this doesn't work, we can untap and Sheoldred's Edict around the counterbalance. And the days. So, Force of Will on top. That's good to know about. What's your pitching Delta? Okay. We got a 2 for 1. That's what our deck's trying to do. We could have got a Surveil land at the end there. But, okay, I like the Fatal Push here. Is it still the Force of Will on top? I imagine it probably is. So I want our opponent to daze a him to Tourach. I'd rather daze a him to Tourach than our threat, to be honest. So let's just fire this him. We know this is resolving. Sorry, we know it's not resolving through the counterbalance. But whether or not they have another spell like a daze here. They do have a daze. Sure. It's a 1-for-1 trade that sets our opponent back on tempo. That's fine. Now I can get the Emperor of Bones going. A Vexing Bauble, you say. I quite like the Bauble here. Let's play the Bauble. It shuts off this card that's in their hand. And it also tests the counterbalance. They're going for a Brainstorm here. An Unholy Heat. Okay. So now we can play out this Emperor of Bones. Would you like to 2-for-1 me? Or they're just going to Unholy Heat this on the next turn anyway. But that's a thing that I'm willing to live with. So we probably get rid of the Frog. That's like the unique type here. And we can get our own Frog off of the Emperor of Bones. If for some reason they don't hit us with an Unholy Heat. Just trading resources for now. A Bauble. Okay, so they don't have a blue card for their Force of Will. Okay, so they've shuffled... No, they've used this Force of Will now. And there's the Unholy Heat. So our opponent is Hellbent, but they have Mishra's Baubles. This is time to use the Surveil land we put in our deck. Necrodominance. Wowzers trousers. That's a big game here. Like I said, our opponent doesn't have many 3s in their deck. So I believe in the power of Necrodominance. Right, so I know it was on top because of the Brainstorm. So now they're shuffling. Can we dodge one of their 2, possibly 3 cards that they have on top of in their deck that counters this? Alright. We're just in with the Necrodominance. It's a good place to be. We're just going to draw 3 cards. Not a great selection, but we've got more life to pay next turn. We can take our opponent off of black next turn as well. Right, they're going to their main phase and casting the Ponder they were trying to cast in their upkeep there, I think. Okay, it's a Psychic Frog. We don't draw any cards because of Necro. Alright, I think we're going to take out their mana source here. So they can't manipulate the top of their library in response. A Brainstorm. Each opponent sacrifice a non-token creature, please. Ponder on top. We can happily discard these, so we're going to draw 4 cards. We need to find some lifelink threats. Get rid of some fetch lands. So we got removal, we got Vexing Bauble. This other Necro, not so good. But we can pop the Bauble at some point if we need to. Psychic Frog, sure. 1 card in our opponent's hand. I would like to attempt this. The top of their deck is a mystery to them. Here's a Delver of Secrets. Okay, this means we will kill it using a Sheoldred's Edict. Non-token creature, please. We know they've got a Delver on top. We don't really want these cards, so we're probably going to draw 5 cards here. Okay, we'll get rid of this Necrodominance we don't require. And we're getting rid of the Bauble, or just... I think we like the Bauble just as a thing that can test the top of their deck. There is a Delver of Secrets. 1 card in our opponent's hand. If it's days, we can play around that. So are we casting this him right now? I think so. Although if we cast him and it's a daze they have in hand, I guess they're not going to daze the him. But if they counterbalance here and have a daze in hand, that's bad. If we just Vexing Bauble, they can still daze anyway, but we can pay for the daze. This just lets us check the top of their library. They have Delirium, so I don't really want them to have an Unholy Heat. I think we are going to him here. A Lightning Bolt at our face. We play the Sheoldred. It cost us 1 life. They didn't reveal off of the counterbalance. We need them to not flip the counterbalance. Okay, we need to dodge for a turn. We're not paying any life here. Because we do gain life with the Sheoldred, but if we die, this ability has to go on the stack. Are they going to flip this? Oh, they did flip it. Yeah, that's the end of that one, I'm afraid. Yeah, like I felt like we were just so much better in this matchup than our opponent and it just didn't quite come together. Like, we drew, like, what, 8 cards off of Necrodominance and basically hit a lot of air. I think statistically that was very unlikely to happen, but this feels like it should be a really easy matchup, and I just didn't quite come together off the Necrodominance draws. And our opponent having the Lightning Bolt right there was certainly a pain. Like, if this was any other card, if this was any other card in their deck and we win that game, I think, because we have the life to pay into Necrodominance and then draw a bunch of cards up. So, yeah, again, when Delver has all the right things, it can beat anyone. That's why Delver is such a good deck. But I'd be more than happy to play this matchup 3 more times, and I would imagine we'd get the vast majority of the games. Let's go to round 3. We are in round 3. Our opponent is just letting their clock tick down. I don't know if something's happened or if they're okay or whatever, but I'll cut to when something changes. It's been about 5.5 minutes so far. Alright, our opponent never showed up, so that's the end of the match. I hope they're okay, but life sometimes gets in the way. Let's go to round 4 and see if we can get a game. This is not a good opener, so we're going to send this one back. There's only 1 lander, but we have multiple spells we can cast. I think I'll keep this and throw out the Necro. We've got 2 draw steps to find a second land, but we can also still just play our spells, and our deck isn't susceptible to Wasteland. Alright, we're going to get griefed here. Alright, we're playing against the big bad guy of blue-black Exsanguinator. Could be. This deck is just... I think it's 25% of the meta at the moment. So we're about to run into it at some point. Right, I've taken our Thoughtseize. Are they going to reanimate and have another crack at our hand? No, just a ponder. So if we're on the play with a hand like this, we get to bauble and stop grief stuff before it happens. But alas, that was not where we're at right now. Right, we will use this one so we can fetch around potential stifles. And also, so our opponent doesn't know what this mystery card in our hand is. I'll play it as Vexing Bauble and shut off Dazes, Force of Wills, and Future Griefs. Right, we got Daze out of it. Sure. So we set our opponent back a turn. Underground Sea. Over to us. An Orcish Bowmasters. I don't hate that. An Entomb. Not a big fan of that one, though. And an Atraxa. Orcish Bowmasters in response to a Brainstorm. Force of Will pitching Psychic Frog. Yep, our opponent has all the answers. A Wasteland. Okay, so not a reanimate right now. That's good. I think I would like to get a threat in play here. We've got a 5/6 Death Touch lifelink. If we can get our opponent's life total low enough, they don't get to reanimate anymore. Animate dead. There it is. Okay, so our Fatal Push doesn't deal with this. We need to find some of our other removal. Again, this is why we have Go for the Throat, because it can hit the big black creatures. A whole bunch of stuff there, isn't there? We can't guarantee Force of Will plus blue card. But they can Entomb reanimate next turn if they want to. Which is obviously not where I want to be. So what do I take? Underground Sea, reanimate, Entomb, grief. Reanimate, Entomb, and grief. Alright. I describe that as pretty bad news for us. What is our solution to this despicable problem? We can Vexing Bauble and try and draw another card. What does that actually do for us, though? Very little. We can attack with this and take out the Atraxa, because we're going to lose this to an Archon of Cruelty next turn anyway. This gives us more life, so we have more turns. So they can reanimate the Atraxa again, or they can do the whole other jazz. If we get this Exsanguinator Cavalry, they're way more likely to go and get the Archon of Cruelty and just nail us. But I think it's going to be easier for us to beat an Archon of Cruelty, so I'm going to try and bait this out. The other option is to just Wasteland our opponent. Do I like that? And then we're going to try and bait out this Archon of Cruelty and then draw into a Sheoldred's Edict. I think that's the best way of trying to win this game. There's the Entomb. Here comes the Archon. Yep, there it is. So this is certainly a matchup where our choice of Graveyard Hate, because of the way our deck's constructed, is going to feel a bit awkward. I'm just reanimating the Atraxa. So they're probably going to find another reanimate spell here. Yeah, I think we can call this a day. Alright. This is the reason it's taken us ages to find matches in the queue. Because nobody wants to play against this deck. So what do I like here? I like some removal spells. I like Opposition Agent to deal with Entomb, but I imagine our opponent is probably going to ease off on the Entomb shenanigans. But I think we definitely want these things. I think we can probably trim on a Necro. Probably trim on some pushes, although we got frogs to worry about. Actually, we need to be able to beat frogs. I don't think we can actually board in the opposition agents in this matchup. The Bowmasters is good. The Vexing Bauble is good. The Emperor of Bones is good. Exsanguinator Cavalry is probably on the lower end. Maybe trim another Necro. Trim a couple of Cavalry. Do we want these Sheoldreds? Because they are a liability for our opponent's reanimation purposes. Although we have pushes, like all of our removal does kill the Sheoldred, so I'm not too worried, and it is very good against our opponent. Are we just going to trim these Cavalries? Or are we just getting rid of the Necrodominance? Yeah. Necrodominance is a good way to gas back up after we've been griefed a bunch, though. Actually, we'll get rid of these hymns. And we'll bring back in another Cavalry and another Dominant. Necro... That seems... Oh, why are we taking a Barrowgoyf out? That's way better than the Cavalry. Let's try that. Okay. What does our opening hand do? Nothing. It loses to Wasteland, so I'm not keeping that. Okay, I'll keep this one, though. You got Graveyard Hate, we got Gas Up. We've got a way of stopping all their free spells. What goes away here? It's probably Go for the Throat. I just don't think we're fighting on that axis. This will stop our opponent from being able to grief. Well, they can still grief and it goes in the graveyard and then they can reanimate it. That's still a viable line. But they won't be able to get two cards out of it. Obviously, they could just Force of Will this or Force of Negation this. But we're at least getting a 2-for-1. Trading up some resources. And if this sticks and they try and like do the grief line and reanimate it, then... Alright. Force of Will pitching Brazen Borrower. Yes, I was going to say, if it does resolve and they do the grief line pitching, we can always get the Faerie Macabre going. Alright, our opponent's cracking at end step. Is this going to be an Entomb? No Entomb. They are pitching a grief here. Okay. Right, taking our Graveyard Hate. We're getting griefed again. Undercity Sewers. They've milled a Troll. I think I would rather just put this Bowmasters into play proactively and give them something to think about and then play the Necro. Yeah, you can brainstorm response. That's fine. We want to pressure our opponent's life total, make reanimate a dead draw. To attack in. What is the chance that our Necrodominance resolves? Quite low. But we need something to go on here. If we leave it in hand, it's probably just going to get taken out with a grief anyway. Let's see if we can Necro. Oh, we can Necro. That's exciting. I would very much like to draw 5 cards, I think. It gives us the ability to discard 1. Got answers to frogs. We've got Graveyard Hate. Is it the Thoughtseize? It's probably the Thoughtseize at this point. Entomb. Okay. So the other option there is to draw loads and loads of cards and try and hit a fairy. That Entomb was a shuffle for the Brainstorm. Doesn't necessarily mean they have the reanimation spell, but they might have the reanimation spell. Why wouldn't they have the reanimation spell? That's the real question. Sure. Okay, so 2 Wastelands, lots of Brainstorms. What creatures would you like? Okay, Wasteland, Grief, Daze, and Ponder. Each opponent sacrifice a non-token creature, please. Attacks. I'm expecting this Emperor of Bones to get dazed. We should have played it pre-combat, though. I was so sure it was going to get dazed. Yeah, it's going to get dazed. That's fine. How many cards would I like to draw this turn? Take 6 cards. Alright. Clean up. Necrodominance, get out of here. I don't think we're doing Wasteland stuff. Get rid of one of these fatal pushes at least. And probably Shadowy Backstreet. Not finding our lifelink creatures is a little bit sketchy. But we have answers to what our opponent's doing. There's the Ponder. We also get a ping off of our Bowmasters here. So Reanimate is becoming an increasingly difficult line for our opponent to take. That's not including the fact that we can actually answer the Reanimates. Alright, ping. A Grief. Sure. Exiling an Archon of Cruelty. Take a look, opponent. Taking one of the Faerie Macabres. Not a surprise. Got some Surveil action over there. A Reanimate targeting our Faerie Macabre. Sure, this helps our race. We have a removal spell for this. Push this. Attacks. And then we'll draw 3 cards here. I don't want to get done by Bowmasters. Okay, so we found a lifelink threat. Alright. We managed to power through there. I think I like how I've boarded here. Maybe this other Sheoldred's Edict is something we actually need here. We'll trim a Thoughtseize. Is that true? Or is it Sheoldred? We'll trim a Sheoldred. Our opponent doesn't reanimate on turn 1, so we have a tiny window. We are decreasing the amount of lifelink threats we have. Alright, Thoughtseize is good. These Necrodominances are not, so we're going to mulligan this one. This is Vexing Bauble into potential removal spells. We're willing to draw a land if we keep a hand that looks like this. I think I'm okay with that. We're going to need a little bit of luck to get through this matchup anyway, I think. And Wasteland. Okay, that's our second mana source. That turns on all of our Sheoldred's Edict type effects. Our opponent's just going to cast an Entomb and then reanimate a big scary monster. No, they didn't do that. Okay. Maybe we get to play a real game. There's definitely a bunch of games with the blue-black Exsanguinator deck. They're just complete non-games. Psychic Frog. Right, we have a kill spell for this in our hand. Beautiful. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. I always read that out because I have clicked the wrong one before. Vexing Bauble might be doing an awful lot of work here. We don't quite know, but it does mean that we can safely play our spells knowing that they'll resolve, which is quite a good feeling. A Wasteland. They're going to Wasteland our Wasteland? They are. And we're just going to get an Emperor of Bones going. They're going to hardcast the Daze. We're getting petty thefted. Go for the throat. Sure. We've got more Emperor of Bones where that came from. Well, how is the Emperor of Bones not a legendary creature? Ask you. Another frog. Alright. Step 1, kill frog. It's better to push this, isn't it? We have to do it now in case our opponent untaps and has some counter magic they can cast. I don't think I'm wastelanding here, because we do need our land as well. Like, we can cast all the spells in our hand. If we wasteland, we might not be able to play any spells for an indefinite amount of time. A Brainstorm, sure. Thoughtseize. I think I would rather just get an Emperor of Bones down and start chipping away at their graveyard. Fatal push, sure. This means that our Bowmasters are a lot more likely to stick around, though. Our opponent might have boarded a lot lower on the graveyard-based stuff. It's fine for us where we don't really have the Faerie Macabres in hand right now. Is this another one of these silly frogs? Animate dead on our Emperor of Bones. So they do still have quite a lot of the graveyard stuff. They're going to remove their Psychic Frog so they can throw that at us later. No, they're just going to get rid of our Emperor of Bones. Our opponent can make this bigger whenever they want. So I think we're going to Shadowy Backstreet first. Another Emperor of Bones. That's reasonable. Are we going to let them... I don't think we can let them. Non-token creature. And next turn we can play an Emperor of Bones. And then we can start doing some real damage to our opponent's life total. That's the plan, at least. We got another kill spell over there. We do. A Brazen Borrower. Okay. We're going to attack our opponent's mana now. Keeps them a long way off of this Brazen Borrower. Undercity Sewers, sure. Force of Will. Not one they want. We can also just kill this Borrower when it comes down. Lots of resource trading. Okay, so we get to finally take one of their frogs away. So next turn we can adapt our Emperor and attack them with a frog, which then gets to draw us a bonus card. A Polluted Delta. I think I'd like to Thoughtseize my opponent first. A Petty Theft on our Emperor of Bones. How do I feel about that? Would I like to get this Orcish Bowmasters down, or would I like to hit them for one with a... I think I'm going to take the value here of hitting them with the Psychic Frog. Right, let's have a look. Okay, our opponent's hand doesn't look great over there. I definitely don't want to take this Archon. Don't really want to take this Grief. I want to give them something to reanimate, although they've already got frogs to reanimate. Would I rather they reanimate a Grief or a frog? Probably a Grief. I'm getting them for some damage. A free card for free. So they find land and start Bowmastering. Sorry, not Bowmastering, Borrowing. We can deal with that. Reanimate, targeting the Psychic Frog. Well, we've just drawn an answer for Psychic Frog. And we know our opponent can't counterspell it. Let's get the Emperor going. I would also like another Bauble. Which means we can crack one of them. I will take your... interesting. Grief does more damage. Frog draws more cards. I'd like to have a frog. Our opponent is playing the most busted deck in the format. of Blue-Black Rescaminator. We should have had a ban before Modern Horizons even came out. And they're saying, can't wait until Bauble gets banned. That's pretty funny to me. Alright, so we managed to beat the absolute big bogeyman in the format. Pretty happy about that. I think Vexing Bauble is a good addition to the format, personally. Alright, let's go to the final round. We are currently 3-1, so let's see if we can put the 4-1 on the board. Alright, for the final round, we're not keeping this hand because it doesn't play magic, so let's hit the correct button here of Mulligan. Yeah, I can see this one. I'll keep this. What are we binning? It's probably a Bauble. That's not necessarily where I need to be here. I think I'd rather just have 2 threats than 2 things that help us resolve threats. Our opponent's Mulligan to 5, and we're on the play with the Vexing Bauble, so maybe we just get our opponent right in the heart if there's some sort of busted combo deck. Oh, this is feeling like a good one for us. Vexing Bauble is such a good card. It keeps people honest in these trying times of dishonest legacy players. Let's play the Vexing Bauble and see if it makes our opponent sad. Now, this might not do anything to their deck, but they've mulliganed a lot, so maybe it does. Ah, they're that flavour of mulliganing heavily, so this is like some sort of prisoner deck, so our Vexing Bauble is unlikely to do very much. But, do you know what will do quite a lot? Is him to Touraching our opponent who mulliganed so much. Alright, let's see if this can do it. Blood Moon and Broadside. Alright. I like our chances in this sort of matchup. We've just got a lot of like good, fair creatures. We don't get cheesed by a lot of the things our opponent has. We're not going through the graveyard. We're not playing on basics. It's a case of does Broadside Bombardier absolutely wreck us or not. I would like to Thoughtseize our opponent. Would I like to take this Fable or this Chrome Mox? Fable is the good card, so I think I'm just going to take that. And I will sacrifice this Bauble looking for a land. Because if we finally come into play tap land, we want to play it now. Okay, we didn't. This is not a matchup for Vexing Bauble. Yes, it can hit a Pitchcast Fury as well as a Chrome Mox, but that's about it. And I can certainly live without that. So Kenzin, not seen that art before. Found a swamp. Now we get to play. When they eventually activate their unlicensed hearse, we will get to kill it. And Barrowgoyf trades with anything in combat, as a general rule. So the Barrowgoyf always has at least 1 toughness, even if there's no cards in graveyard. So they can't kill it with the unlicensed hearse. What is this? A Rabble Master. Sure. So they can attack here. If we block, then they unlicensed hearse, and then our Rabble Master will die. So I'm not gonna do that. Sorry, our Barrowgoyf, not Rebel Master. Verdant Catacombs, you say. Practice. Let's get a swamp here. Push this goblin. You can crew the hearse if you want. Our creature does have Death Touch. Would you like to trade your unlicensed hearse? They would. We only gain 2, but we do still trade off here. And then we get to play another one. No play from our opponent. That is unfortunate for them. We actually assembled the combo of Barrowgoyf and Necrodominance though. So I think we attack first, see what we shake loose, because we can mill something that we might want to put into our hand here. Right, they're just going to take it. Let's gas up. I'm kind of living the dream that I wanted now. Alright, a Chrome Mox, printing a Blood Moon. The One Ring. Sure. So this doesn't get to attack now. Play this out. Probably draw. I kind of want an Orcish Bowmasters here. How deep am I willing to go? We're definitely taking 3 cards. So the 2, I think we can probably take a 4th card. Then we go to clean up. We don't want this Bauble. We don't want this Thoughtseize. Alright. You're going to tap that One Ring, are you? I thought you might. And then we've got a Sheoldred for next turn as well, which is going to just be even worse. So how much is this? 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, plenty. Yeah, we got to live the dream a little bit there. Let's go to the sideboard here. So, as discussed, these Vexing Baubles look pretty bad. I think Powder Keg for Chalice is an option. I like removal spells, and I like him to Tourach potentially. Our opponent's trying to empty their hand though, so I'm not big on the hymns. So maybe we could trim these other hymns. That gives us some kegs, and then we could just have an opposition agent just to come and ambush them, or we could have the hymn to Tourach. as a nice way to 2-for-1 our opponent and get some value going. I think I probably like him more than Thoughtseize as well, actually. But we'll keep a few in, sort of mix up our mana cost a little bit. Do we even need these powder kegs? I think they're fine, and I'll take fine. It's okay. I will keep it. If we get chaliced on one, that's not the end of the world. And I think... So we could either have this to play a fetch land so we can play around Blood Moon, if that's the thing our opponent's going to do. Or we could just Wasteland our opponent and hope that sets them back a fair chunk. I quite like the Wasteland here. They didn't use like a Chrome Mox, so they didn't have persistent mana. Because they didn't use on the first turn. So maybe this does a decent chunk of stuff. A Shadow Skull tapped. Okay, I can live with that. Basic Swamp is a lovely sight to see. This means that if they Blood Moon us, we can still cast all of our black spells. Right, so I've got Sin and Spirit Guide over there. Broadside Bombardiers. That's a pretty real threat. I think this does have to just be a swamp still. I think we need to play around the Blood Moon. I don't think our opponent's got it in, but this is kind of annoying. Would I like to... I think we hymn this turn. Just give our opponent less food for the Bombardiers. The next turn we can Powder Keg and push. And the Powder Keg gives us the Revolt as well if we wanted it. Another Bombardiers. Okay. I don't believe they're going to throw this chalice at us. So what is our plan here? I don't think we've got the time to do Keg all the way up to 3. I think we play this Keg. We blow up the chalice. We take out one of the Bombardiers. And if they don't play anything, we might be able to snag one with Bowmasters. But our deck is also packed full of removal at this point. So I believe that we can answer this Bombardiers before it kills us. It's a case of whether or not they follow up with Rabble Masters and stuff. Sim and Spirit Guide I can live with. This is a Lava Axe though. Let's see if they dome us with a Lava Axe right now. I don't think they will. I think they'll just take the 2 damage off of it for like future turns. And they can also use it to clear blockers and things. I guess it depends how fearful of the cards in our hand they are. Sheoldred the Apocalypse. So this is something they can dome with the Spirit Guide. So I think we try and force them to dome the Bowmasters. And this also means we can get a Surveil land and get another look towards some removal if that doesn't work. We don't want our opponent to draw another thing. Alright, they haven't. Let's play the Bowmasters. Ping our opponent for 1. That was foolish. We shouldn't have pinged them for 1. Should have pinged the Bombardiers. Because now they can throw the Sim and Spirit Guide at one of the tokens. That does save us a little bit there, doesn't it? Let's get this Undercity Sewers going. Yeah, that was just a bit loose from me. Alright, let's make a Shoulder of the Apocalypse. You need a 3-drop to be able to kill this in combat. Now, they can still attack through it with the Menace. But we start gaining life next turn. Alright, so just crash them for 2 here. They're definitely not blocking our Sheoldred, so I'd very much like to draw some cards as well if we can get that going. Let's just attack. Do we take out the Shadow Skull or do we take out the city? Feels like they're holding back with the city, so I'm going to take that out. That makes something like Fury not really castable. Alright, our opponents just had enough and they're off it. And we have come away with a pretty tasty 4-1 record. Now, this 4-1 record does come with a caveat in the fact that one of our opponents just didn't show up. Hopefully everything's okay with them, but you know, life gets in the way sometimes. And hopefully whatever they're doing was important and they got it sorted. So technically it's a 3-1, but the one round we lost was against the Delver matchup where our opponent had to have exactly Lightning Bolt on that exact turn to not lose the game. So I think we demonstrated this deck is pretty solid. So let's talk about it and get right into it. So Vexing Bauble is really good. It allows us to play a fair game. And this means that we get to play Bauble. So because we're trying to do like Necrodominance and Bauble, this is quite a nice combo together, weirdly. Because it means we have a reason to not be playing scam stuff. Which, you know, is probably going to get banned in the very near future anyway. But it gives us a reason not to be running that sort of stuff. And it's not just we're playing a strictly worse black deck. Our deck is doing a different thing. And I think what we're doing is just powerful, right? We're playing good black spells. We have a very solid mana base. We've got a little bit of land destruction. We've got a thing that allows us to resolve our threats as well as stopping our opponent from comboing off. We've got excellent hand disruption. We've got a nice suite of removal that actually kills the creatures dead, so we can Fatal Push away a Psychic Frog, which is something that in some decks I've been sat there with a Dismember and go, oh, I can't actually Dismember this 1/2 Frog because they'll just dump a load of cards into it and then we'll be dead soon. So that's really nice that we've got some good clean answers here. And Barrowgoyf looks pretty good to me. It's just a big beater that smashes down. Like, the fact that it can draw cards wasn't something we actually got to do with it today, but it mills you for 3 and you can put a creature card from among those cards into your hand. Now, the way this is worded means that if you're underneath like a Leyline of the Void, you still get the card in your hand because it says if you do, you may put a creature from among them into your hand, which is the same wording as Gyruda, which also works through Leylines and stuff because it's just one of the cards that got milled over. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. And then it's pretty nice. We didn't get to do much with the Sheoldred. Obviously, it won that last game, but pretty much any of our threats would probably win us that game at that point, more or less. Exsanguinator Cavalry is fine. This card isn't one that I'm super in love with. I think it is fine, is the thing. If it was like a 2/4, I would be a lot more up on it. But the fact that it just died cleanly to a Lightning Bolt as a 3-drop is a little bit sketchy sometimes. And we're not leveraging other knights like the 1-mana knight that grows. That's quite a nice one to pair with this. They're both vampires as well. But yeah, this card is fine. It makes sense in our deck. I think some people are a little bit overly hyped on this card, but it is fine. It is doing a thing that we want to be doing. Another thing I thought about in this slot was a Rotting Regisaur, but I think we just needed the lifelink, and I think that showed on on that game where we Necrodominanced a whole bunch against that Delver player and just drew nothing but like blanks. So that's definitely a problem that you can sometimes have. But the Barrowgoyf, Exsanguinator Cavalry, like you could play this deck without the Necrodominance and it's still probably good. Like you turn these into 4, I don't know, whatever other card advantage engine you want, something that doesn't just cut you off completely. But I think Necrodominance is very strong, and if we ever get to do Sheoldred Necrodominance, that is the sweet spot. But yeah, we're running a bunch of good cards. I do like Emperor of Bones. It seems pretty solid here. We managed to get a bit deeper into our deck once because we brought back a frog and attack with it. We drew an extra card. That extra card meant that when our opponent played a threat, we drew the answer to it that turn instead of waiting another turn, which wouldn't have happened. This also just casually suppresses Delver's ability to do some stuff. You can take them off of Delirium and all sorts. So you can make a Dragon's Rage Channeler attack you, or not attack you, depending on how you want to curtail their graveyard, and then you can steal whatever you want. I don't know, it just seems like everything here is just a bunch of good cards, right? And they're in pretty reasonable numbers. And I enjoy playing this deck. I think there's a lot to be done in the mono-black space. There's a lot of good black cards at the moment, and the fact that this sort of shell is completely separate from the scam shell and still feels very much like a strong legacy deck is a pretty good place to be. Like, we had a tough run of it today. We weren't playing against like weird and wacky decks. We had to play against Blue-Red Delver, which is the second most played deck in the format, and one of the few things that can go toe-to-toe with Blue-Black Rescaminator. We played against Blue-Black Rescaminator and beat that, which is the best deck by a significant margin and is warping the format and is definitely going to get a ban soon. And we played against Grixis Delver, which again is another one of these Delver decks that does a lot of stuff, is really strong. And then we played against Mono-Red Prison, like Mono-Red Stompy, which is, again, I think it's the 3rd or 4th most played deck. It's right up there because the way it plays the game means that it can steal games quite nicely from decks like Rescaminator and Delver. So, yeah, we had a bit of a baptism of fire, and we only lost because our Necro wasn't very strong for us, and our opponent happened to have the exact right thing. So this deck feels like it does the right things in the meta right now, and for main deck Vexing Bauble is the place to be. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this little brew from me, and if you've got any thoughts on how to improve it, let me know. I have another similar deck built, well, it's built around a similar theme to this, but is quite a bit different, and I'm not sure if it's going to be as good as this. It's a little bit more fun, so we'll see how that pans out. So remember to like and subscribe. If you subscribe, you won't miss when I play the other sort of fairer Necrodominance deck. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me that I get to do this. Obviously, At some point, I might even scrape up to making minimum wage doing that, and that'll be great. All right. Thank you so much, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths, as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month, as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.